Okay, I see there's been a little bit of attrition today. The lecture is a little bit quieter than it was earlier. And there will be some overlap with what we've heard previously today. But hopefully, you can still get something out of this talk. So, a couple of months ago when we started meeting for International Women's Day, I found out about Caroline Herschel. And maybe everyone else knows who she is, but I had never heard of her. I knew about William Herschel, her brother, who's quite famous, but I certainly hadn't heard of her. So when I started researching about her life, I found out that she was essentially the first professional female scientist and astronomer. So it got me thinking about, how far the field has come since she was alive and where it could actually get to in the future, because we're still not at 50-50. So, as we heard, can you not hear me?
No, you're fine, Karen.
Okay. Caroline Herschel is regarded as the first professional female astronomer. Obviously, women have done astronomy beforehand. I think the history goes back at least 3,900 years, probably even longer, but that's just what we have of recorded history. But she is defined as the first professional female astronomer. And she was born in Hanover in Germany in 1750 to a quite big family. She unfortunately contracted typhus at the age of 10, and it caused vision loss in her left eye and stunted her growth. She ended up only growing to 4 feet 3 inches tall, which is 1.3 meters, quite small, and she had scarring on her face. The reason I bring this up is her family then assumed that she would never marry. No one would ever want to marry her. So her mother felt that it best that she just basically trained to be a house servant rather than become educated in accordance with what her father wanted. He wanted all the kids to be educated in music and mathematics and language. That's basically what she did. She was a house servant, and then her father died in 1772, and her brother William was in the UK at the time as a musician, and he invited her to join him in Bath, where he'd established himself as a musician. So I imagine it took a little bit longer than 12 hours, but she eventually arrived in Bath, and she started to train as a singer and performed very successfully with William for some time. So they had concerts together in Bath. I think this is sort of one of the only surviving posters that they had. And she was a really, really good singer. They were very popular for quite some time. But eventually William developed a casual interest in astronomy, a hobby that I don't think anyone, not many people had back then. And he tutored Caroline in mathematics. What he would do, he would observe in the evenings, and then the next morning, he would lecture her about what he'd found out and what he'd observed the previous night. And she sort of began helping him, but actually, initially, she was reluctant to get involved because she really wanted to pursue her singing career. But in 1782, William discovered the planet Uranus, and he accepted the private office of court astronomer to George III, the king at the time. And that year, they gave their last musical performance, which didn't go down very well with the critics, apparently. And then they moved closer to the royal palace, where William began to pursue astronomy in more detail. They weren't rich enough to buy a decent telescope outright, so instead they made telescopes together. This is a picture online of William polishing a lens and she basically serving him, which, was true initially. She was more of a servant to William. She initially did a lot of the housework before he married. But then when he got married, his new wife took over the housework, and that meant that Caroline could actually get involved in helping him actually with the astronomical interests. And so they built telescopes together. And what I was reading about is basically they're both credited with modernizing astronomy because of the telescopes they built and the observations they made. So eventually she really wanted her own money and to be more independent from her brother. And as a result of that, George III gave her an annual salary for her work as William's assistant, making her the first professional female astronomer. Now, it was exactly £50, and the inflation calculator says that's £9,800 today, which is roughly what I pay for rent in Cambridge. So you wouldn't be able to get much else done with that money today, unfortunately. And she has loads of astronomical achievements. I won't be able to list them all. and she discovered 8 comets. The first one is quite funny. William was away in Germany, I think, visiting family or friends, and she, used his telescope and almost straight away discovered her first comet, and then in the next few years she discovered 7 more. She published and updated catalogues and corrected mistakes that sort of fellow male astronomers had made. She was, as I said, I think this technically makes her the first scientist to receive a salary. And that made her also the first woman in England to hold a government position, the position she had under the king. And she was the first woman to publish scientific findings in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. And alongside Mary Somerville, they were the first women named as honorary members to the Royal Astronomical Society in 1835. And in 1828, the Royal Astronomical Society presented her with their gold medal for all of her work. What I found crazy was that no woman would be awarded that medal again until Vera Rubin was awarded it in 1996. So, that's over 150 years, no woman got that medal again. So later in life, William died in 1822, and she decided to return to Hanover. She dedicated herself to completing his unfinished projects and preserving his legacy, and she continued to pursue her own research interests, and soon completed cataloguing 2,500 nebulae and many star clusters. And then she died at the grand old age of 97, leaving behind an amazing legacy where she helped to bring astronomy into the modern age. And so, it got me thinking, where are we now? That's 176 years, I think, since her death. And currently, there's 21.9% female members in the International Astronomical Union. And I think I got this count right. 1 out of the 26 Nobel Prizes that have been awarded to, the category of physics, but for astronomical work, 1 out of 26 have gone to women, so that's less than 4%. And we already know that Jocelyn Bell Burnell deserved one too. So, how do we get to equal opportunity enrollment and equal retention? There's no reason why mathematics and the physical sciences can't get to 50-50 when many other fields have got there already, or at least they've got there at the undergraduate level, and hopefully eventually we'll get there at the academic level. And a lot of really good work has come from Australia recently. So Natalia Lawson visited, I think it was October time last year, and she spoke about this paper that she was involved in, titled Invisible Women, Gender Representation in High School Science Courses Across Australia. So what they did, they looked at the syllabus, the science syllabus, at all the different territories in Australia, and they found that physics accounted for 56% of the mentions of scientists, with the other sciences like biology and chemistry accounting for the rest. And approximately 150 scientists were mentioned in total, but they broke it down by territory. And out of those 150 scientists, only 1 mention of a female scientist in any course for any state was Rosalind Franklin, who was mentioned once in the Queensland biology syllabus and once each in the South Australia Northern Territory biology and chemistry syllabuses. Unfortunately, it's not just Australia. There's a similar picture here in the UK. Back in 2020, a charity looked at this, and they said that not a single woman's name features in science GCSE specifications from the major exam boards, and in the double science exam board, only Rosalind Franklin and Mary Leakey are mentioned, and that's compared to over 40 male scientists that I mentioned. And whilst I haven't looked, my guess is that other countries, in Europe and America as well, would also have a similar bleak picture. And we know that role models are crucial. It's important that children can see themselves in their role models, be that through gender, social background, ethnicity, or sexuality. So this is going to be a huge problem. And if you don't fix education, then you're not going to get equal enrollment, and then you're definitely not going to get 50-50 at the academic level either. And the Australian researchers are part of a collaboration called Include Her. Scal and I had a meeting with them, I think 2 months ago now, and we're recruiting for volunteers to maybe look at doing something similar in the UK and doing a similar analysis. So if you want to get involved, please come and speak to us. Also in Australia, Lisa Cooley has done a few Nature Astronomy Perspective papers and articles. Really, really interesting. I recommend you read them to get the details. So She says that the fraction of senior women in astronomy in the US, Germany, Canada, Australia, China, and the UK has remained at or less than 20% for several decades, despite 30 to 40% of PhDs in astronomy being completed by women internationally over the same time frame. And she said that in astronomy, labour market models suggest that women depart astronomy at a rate 3 to 4 times higher than men. And a lot of that reason is because women are more likely to leave astronomy than men, owing to the need to find a job for a spouse or partner in the same geographical area. And dual hire career programs can actually help couples to stay in academia. She also discussed the fact that there is a widespread implicit bias in hiring, writing referee reports or papers, giving paper citations, allocation of grants, and telescope time, which we've heard a bit about today. And that all plays a major role in the imbalance that we see. It affects recruitment rates and promotion rates, and then facilitates the departure of women from the field. And the problem is it's difficult to remove implicit bias at every decision-making stage, even on gender-balanced and trained recruitment committees, because on average, as we've seen today, both males and females have an implicit bias toward male applications. So this figure is showing the fraction of women at each level. So we start with honours and master's students, then PhDs, and then you've got postdocs, assistant and associate professors, professors and distinguished professors. So what happens is, she says it's caused by 3 factors of why women leave each academic stage. In terms of levels A to B and C to D, that is where the majority of the problem is. And that's, in Australia, due to low promotion rates at universities and continued inequitable hiring into all levels. And this figure shows the pipeline stress. So B to C and level D to E, not too bad for men and women. A to B and C to D, both bad for both genders, but in this case, women are disproportionately affected. And Lisa Cooley was saying that initiatives to mitigate this pipeline stress include longer-term, 5-year postdoctoral positions with part-time options, support for return to astronomy research after career breaks, increasing the fraction of permanent positions relative to fixed-term contracts, and offering women-only permanent positions, including recruitment of women directly to the professorial levels and mentoring of women for promotion to the highest levels. So it would be nice if academia was purely based on merit, but unfortunately it's not. Standard merit-based appointments have failed to increase the fraction of women at the highest levels. So in the second paper, Lisa showed through forward modelling that if we just maintain the status quo right now in Australia, and this probably applies to other countries, but it would be interesting to see that analysis as well. But in Australia, if we maintain the status quo, then the fraction of women at all levels will be below 30% for at least 60 years. But if she talks about affirmative action being the best option, then what happens is if that's introduced, the fraction of 33% and 50% women at all levels can be achieved in 10 and 25 years respectively. And she talks about how open and transparent female-only hires avoid implicit bias towards male applications, so you're not wasting men's time for applying for those positions. But sometimes those positions can be seen as token hires. So she says that you've got to make those positions extremely prestigious, and that will help correct the historic gender imbalances. And successful retention policies will need to include, but not limited to, and she lists 5 things. So increasing the number of women in senior positions, improving and celebrating work-life balance for all department members, clear action against sexism, insults, microaggression, exclusionary behaviour, and other factors that produce a poor work culture and atmosphere for women and other minorities, help for partners of astronomers to obtain positions in the same location, and more permanent positions with less fixed-term positions. And only when all of those issues are addressed will we actually be able to stem the high departure rate of women and actually have equal retention. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, this is all great, some forward modelling and talking about the problems, but can we actually change things? Is anything actually going to change? Well, again, Australia have shown the way. So this came out last year in August, and Lisa Cooley and the Include Her team have discussed why all the problems exist in astronomy and talk about how those problems will just persist if nothing is done. So this centre in Australia is called Astro 3D, and it's a centre that is actually made up of several partner institutions and universities. And in January 2018, they had 37% women total, so already fairly high, and 31% female investigators. What they did was they applied the recruitment methods Lisa Cooley talks about in those Nature Astronomy papers. And they did those recruitment methods to 47 fixed-term postdoctoral positions across 9 universities between 2017 and 2022 within that centre. And they achieved 50% women personnel in 5 years, including 56% female postdocs and 52% female students recruited. And what happened was a tipping point came at 40% women overall, after which female students enrolled in the centre at accelerating numbers. And she actually says that that's consistent with sociological theory. If you have minorities in a particular institution, when you get to roughly 35% in sociological theory, they say that's the tipping point. So they achieved that at 40%. And then recruitment practices including having widely broadcast gender targets, mandatory implicit bias training, 50% women committee chairs, 50% women on selection committees, and 50% women on shortlists. But for anyone worried, they didn't actually include quotas. And the increase in women was not at the expense of men in the centre. So men didn't lose their jobs. You can see here on the right-hand side that whilst the number of men might not have increased, the total number did, and most of those hires were women. So, this is an institution with 300 people, and I think it's really, really exciting. They've basically shown all institutions across the world how it can be done, and really quickly as well. I mean, Lisa was talking about 10 to 25 years to get to 33% and 50%, and they did this in 5 years, and she talked a lot about how the culture of this particular centre is important in that as well. So, professional female astronomy started with Caroline Herschel as the only woman, and 176 years after her death, I think gender balance is now within sight in the field of astronomy, and I think if other institutions implement a lot of these policies that they talk about, then we could start to see this happen across the world. So, thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been interesting and illuminating. I'll try and answer any questions if you have them. So, yeah, thanks.
Did anyone have any questions for Brian?
Yeah.
So, just on your first slide, who was the person from 3,900 years ago? Really, really curious. The second slide.
Oh yeah. I think she was an astronomer in the sort of Mediterranean region. I can't remember if it was ancient Greece or ancient Egypt. But she's listed on Wikipedia, and then she didn't have a Wikipedia page.
Gender bias on Wikipedia.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Someone should create the page then, right? Someone would be here.
Yeah.
If there's information out there about the person.
Someone called Alchemies from the 2nd century BC. That was obviously 2,000 years before. So that was where they lived there.
Some of the names overlap or actually differ depending on which source you look at, apparently.
Yeah, so I was wondering, Australia was able to promote and to have this kind of program. I was wondering, is it related to the way they are organized in comparison, for instance, to the UK, where each university is different? Would it be possible to have this kind of super institution all over the UK, supervising all of them and trying to offer jobs?
I think it would be possible. What she actually says in the paper is that it isn't to do with the fact that it's a big institution across different universities. She says if you apply those methods to any individual university or institution, then you'll be able to achieve 50-50. It's just that particular institution was sort of, they purposely decided to go for this target and really use an evidence-based approach, use all the methods that people have been talking about for years but not implementing, and then they actually did it. I think there's often a lot of talk about we know the problems and we know how to solve them, but then it's not done. And I don't know about specific university policies in the UK or large institutions, but I hear about people going for certain interviews, and the policies that she talks about, a lot of UK universities don't do those things. So I think, yeah, it could happen at a big institution or a small institution or cross institutions, but 5 or 6 methods have to be used, otherwise all the biases are just going to creep in there, if that makes sense.
Any other final comments? Cool. Okay, well then, great again.